Hey y'all, how's everyone doing? Well, you can see from the title that we have a controversial subject, which I'm never afraid to work with together with you, because I'm going to tell y'all something. Anything that I have ever come into as far as knowledge from the Lord has been because I sought Him out. And I don't mean just for 5 minutes, even though He can do that. It's been when something really troubled me and it kind of tripped me up, where I wanted to understand Him fully and know Him for who He is, and then I get confused about something to the point that, for lack of a better word, doctrinal, but an understanding of the truth of who He is, and my heart was truly to know Him completely and not have any doubts, but only because of going through His Word. So, I think if you have questions about things that are controversial, it is good to talk to other Christians. It's especially good to talk to pastors. I trust a website, Christian Apologetics and Research Ministry, CARM.org, carm.org. And almost any subject that I've ever looked up there, except one, I have been in full agreement with. And the one subject that I did, I personally contacted Matt Slick, who is the founder and author of most of what's on there. He has a team now, but and he and I went back and forth, and he actually changed his website, and that was the subject, Jesus is God, which I have a passion for, and I believe it's because I really wanted to understand the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So today, talking about the fact that Jesus, we're looking at Matthew 24:36. There's other verses there. I think there's one in Mark also, but it's just basically where Jesus is talking to his apostles about his return. And the important thing is to look at it in context and why was he even talking to them about it. But a lot of people do get stuck on this verse, and so I thought I'd address it the best of my understanding through years and years and years of questioning and trying to find answers. And I do feel like this is something that partly has to do with the fact that God will always remain a mystery. And I'm okay with not fully understanding everything in my own strength, and that if God doesn't completely answer me on something that I'm comfortable with it, I have to say, hello to my sweetheart. Hello, my sweetheart. But anyway, so the subject of whether or not Jesus knows the hour of his return trips some people up enough, especially people in cults, but just sometimes atheists or agnostics, that they won't even listen any further. And so sometimes it's our job as followers and ministers of the Word of Christ, to the best of our understanding, to those that God calls us to speak to, which is you ladies for me, and some of my ladies in my life group friends and Bible study, stuff like that. We do discuss these matters. That God will give us further information. But my job isn't to know everything. That's God's job. That is also where Eve screwed up in the garden, y'all. That's where she had to know. She took from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so it was that she had to know instead of trust. Also, she didn't listen to God. She listened to another voice, and that was the sin. But the mind sin that happened before the action sin of following it was that she had to know instead of trust God, instead of relying on God and just doing what he said, and trust and obey. When you obey, that proves you trust, that proves your faith. And that's where she blew it, and blew it for all mankind after she talked to Adam, and he made the same mistake. Instead of listening to God, he listened to her. So it's very important for us. It's good to have dialogue and healthy, respectful, kind debate. Never ugliness. That will never work, and I will delete your comments if you're hateful. Because we're not going to have that here. Sorry if I sound a little demonstrative. Sorry, not sorry. All right, so Matthew 24, verse 36. So the important thing that I want to do here is pick a couple of the older translations. Because what I'm going to do is tell you, I believe that there's some things that we can look at this in light of. One is the translational difference. And that does not mean that you have totally lost meaning in translation. It means that you need to be aware of it. Also contextual meaning. Also, the role of the Son versus the Father versus the Holy Spirit. That needs to be investigated. And just, we'll talk about that at length. So let me get through, I'm going to just pick a couple of translations here that are the older ones. And I've done another video on the translations and how we got them from the early copies that were from the original manuscripts, which don't exist anymore. There's only 3 original copies, and then the hundreds or tens of thousands, really, copies of the copies that exist. And then after that, how it came up through the printing press and all these different things as it was translated all through the different years, and then just some of our modern translations. So I purposely wanted to look at some of the older ones. And so let's just look at the Douay Rheims. And I'm not going to go into what each of these are, y'all, just because I don't think that would be profitable right now. It would be too long. So, all right, so let me look at this Douay close by. It is the Douay Rheims Challoner revision is from 1752. So let's listen to it there. Whoops, I'm in the wrong book. Let's go back to Matthew. St. Matthew 24. Let's scroll down to 36. Sorry, I'm having to kind of hold this down. So let me just try to pull it up so I'm not looking down at y'all. Okay, I have my Bible, but I think this will be a little faster. The electronic. But of that day and hour no one knoweth, not the angels of heaven, but the Father alone. Notice the Son is not mentioned. Okay, now let's look at a New King James or an Authorized King James. KJV. There's one. Okay, KJV. 36. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but the Father only. Never mentions the Son. Let's look at New Messianic, or let's look at World Messianic British Edition. These are older. Actually, I'm not sure how old this one is, though. No one knows of that day and hour, not even the angels in heaven, but my Father only. Okay, let's look at the Youngs. That's a real old one, isn't it? I think it is. 1898, yeah. Okay, and it says, and concerning that day and the hour, no one hath known, not even the messengers of the heavens, except my Father only. Messengers are known in Hebrews chapter 1. Angels are explained in their messengers, amongst other things, what they do for God. Let's see. Let's look at maybe one more. Let's look at the Orthodox Jewish Bible. Let's look at that. But concerning the day and the hour, no one dashed not Malachim as showing my hand for I'm sorry. That's not going to help us because of the language difference. But I think it's the same, to be honest. And also the 1599 Geneva Bible. That's old. But you know what? I don't see it. Where is it? Okay, that's enough. But they all basically do not mention Jesus. Okay, now I'm going to look at some of the more modern translations. Let's see. Let's look at NIV. That's the one I like the best personally. I find it the easiest to read, and the translational team was immense. And again, that's in my video explaining all the different translations. But about the day or the hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. And I'll just say all the other ones that I was fixing to mention, but for the sake of time, other modern translations do mention the Son. Now, first, let me tell you this. There's a cultural piece here I didn't mention. That is my understanding from different scholars and pastor friends who've explained it to me. When the bride and groom were getting ready to get married, one of the things that happened was the father would do an addition onto his home for them. And when the short story is, when it was completed, he would sound the trumpets, and that will let the groom know he could go ahead and go get his bride and bring her home. We're the bride, Jesus is the groom, and that is the context that Jesus was talking. It was the culture of that day. We know he often did that, like he would bring up analogies when he would give stories that parables that would include agriculture, because it's highly agricultural region, or merchant, all kinds of analogies that I just, hundreds are popping in my head, so that's just too much to go into. But not hundreds, but lots. But the bottom line is, so that's part of why Jesus put it the way that he did. Okay. The other thing that we can keep in mind, if you want to say, well, but you know, if it says the Son in these later translations, is that why the later translations added it? Probably. I don't know that answer. But I will encourage you to also look at Revelation 19:12. And some of you may say, Beth, what does that have to do with anything? And I'll tell you. Look at Revelation 19:12. And I'm going to show you some other ones that will be helpful to you, I think. 19:12. This is where we're seeing Jesus, basically. I saw heaven and earth in verse 11. I saw heaven standing open, and there before me was a white horse whose rider's name is Faithful and True. With justice he judges and wages war. His eyes are like blazing fire, and on his head are many crowns, and his name is written on him that no one knows but himself. That's the Son of God, Jesus Christ. Does that mean the Father doesn't know? It says only he knows. Just like this other one says that only, that no one knows but the Father, not even the Son. So if you're going to start doing it that way, you got to look at other examples that are an analogy, apples to apples, and that would be one. Another one, if you just look, I just thought of this one. If you look at Hebrews, hold on, let me find it. In Hebrews chapter 1, y'all know it's a very big Jesus is God chapter. And there in verse, what verse is it? 5, it says, to which of the angels did God ever say, you are my son, today I've become your father, or again I will be his father, he will be my son? And then God says to the firstborn, let all the angels worship him, which God would never say worship anybody but him, right? Thou shalt worship God alone. And then in verse 8 he says, but about the Son he says, your throne, O God, will last forever. So now you have the Father calling the Son God, his God? Yes, because they're what? They're both the nature of God. Here's another good example in John chapter 5, verses 22. Hold on, let me get that one for you.